Every day looks the same until you pause for a minute and place that day into God's hands. Just that very first moment is enough to redirect your soul, open the way for peace, and remind you that you do not have to walk through this day alone. There are mornings that begin with a soft light, gently laying itself over the rooftops, over the still empty squares, over the stone streets, still holding the coolness of the night. It is that moment when the city has not truly awakened, when people have not yet been pulled into the familiar motion of a busy day. It is precisely in that stillness that we have a chance to look back at ourselves before everything outside starts demanding our attention. I want to speak to you exactly at that intersection, the point where you have just woken up, perhaps with a bit of fatigue, a bit of worry, a bit of expectation, or maybe with no clear emotion at all. A point no one else sees, but one that decides a large part of the tone of your entire day. Europeans often say that a morning started in the right way can save an entire day. That is true on the level of everyday life, and it is even more true in the life of the soul. Many of us wake up and are immediately pulled into the whirlwind of responsibilities and worries. News, work, emails, plans, unfinished thoughts from yesterday. Very quickly we find ourselves swept away before we have even had a chance to breathe. But there is another choice, a very small choice, that has the power to shape the entire day, putting God in the very first place. I want you to pause for a moment and feel this. When you choose to pray first, you are bringing your soul back to its true position. You are not letting the rhythm of the world decide the rhythm inside you. You are not letting fear or the chaos of a new day steer your heart. You begin from a point of stillness, of light, of truth. And the remarkable thing is that such a simple act can open up a much wider space for peace, for clarity, for courage, things that human strength alone can hardly produce. When you put God first, the rest of the day seems to find its proper order again. That does not mean everything will be perfect, but it does mean you step into this day with a different kind of strength. This is not theory. This is a principle that has been lived and proven across many generations. Jesus Christ says that if we seek the kingdom of God first, everything else will come at the right time and in the right way. Europeans tend to value simple things that have depth, and this teaching is exactly such a thing. Not loud, not showy, but strong enough to uphold an entire soul. Therefore, I want you to see this morning as an invitation, not an invitation into haste, but into alignment, not into anxiety, but into peace, not into a long to-do list, but into the presence of the one who can make everything around you become clear. If you are listening to these words, it means you are choosing a different way to begin, a way that is quiet but powerful, a starting point from which the whole day can take on a completely new tone. I want to tell you the story in a close, familiar way. Imagine you are standing in an old square in a city. The wind moves gently across old tiled roofs. The sound of church bells rings from afar, not too loud, but just enough to remind you that this life has another rhythm, another depth that we sometimes forget. You look around, people in a hurry, shops opening early, modern life filling every corner of the street, and then you realize that this world is always demanding. It demands your attention, your concern, your performance. But the words of Jesus Christ are different. He invites you to put one thing before everything else, not time, not work, not your fears, but your relationship with God. And when that is placed in its rightful position, everything else begins to turn in its proper orbit. That is exactly what you are doing this morning. You are choosing to put God first, not through a heavy ritual, but through the recognition that your soul needs a trustworthy foundation before stepping into a long day. Throughout the Bible, we see stories that illustrate this very clearly. When the people of Israel stood before the Red Sea, they had no plan, no strategy, no weapons. They had only one thing. They placed their faith in God first. And when that happened, the sea opened. When the walls of Jericho stood tall and unshakable, they did not fall by human muscle. People walked in obedience, put God first, and the walls collapsed. When Daniel was in the lion's den, it was not his intellect or ability that saved him, but his choice to put God first, and the lions' mouths were shut. Those stories are not just for telling, they are reminders that the one you are praying to this morning is not an abstract idea. He is the one who made a way in the wilderness, who opened the sea for his people to cross, who pulled down walls, healed sickness, raised the dead, and transformed lives that seemed completely finished. And what is noteworthy is that every one of those miracles began at the same point. People put God first. No miracle began with fear. No turning point began with despair. All of them began with a trust placed in the right place. When you pray in the morning, you are walking into that same principle. You are not trying to control what will happen in the day. You are simply acknowledging that you want to start your journey from where the light is. Perhaps you are carrying things that weigh on your heart, a complicated situation whose outcome you do not yet know, a relationship that is hurting you, a financial problem that keeps you awake at night, a plan delayed for so long that you have almost lost hope. These things are very real. No one denies them, but they are only part of the picture. They are not the whole day, and they are certainly not your whole life, and they do not have the right to define your morning. In Matthew 6:33, Jesus Christ does not invite you to deny those concerns. He simply invites you to put them in the right place, not at the top of the list, but after you have put God in the first place. Because when what stands first is right, everything that follows naturally finds its place. You are standing at a junction between life and faith, a very small point, but one with more influence than you think. When you pray first, you resemble David, who told God that he would hear his voice every morning. You resemble Daniel, who knelt down 3 times a day, even when the world stood against him. You resemble those who have gone before you in many generations, those who understood that morning is not just the start of a day, but the laying of a foundation for the journey ahead. The question is not what today will bring, but what spirit you will carry into it. And the truth is that when you begin with God, you never begin in lack, you begin in fullness. When we speak about putting God first, sometimes we feel the idea is abstract. But the Bible does not leave us floating in abstraction. On the contrary, it uses very concrete images and stories to show that morning faith is not a beautiful idea, but a principle woven into every page of spiritual history. Let me share with you a few such images so that you can see more clearly what you are stepping into today. When Isaiah wrote that no weapon formed against you shall succeed, he was not writing to people living in a peaceful world. He was writing to people in times of instability, surrounded by accusations and visible threats. Yet that promise still stood. It stood not because they were strong, but because they placed their trust in the right place. Your morning is the same. You may not be facing literal weapons, but you face invisible things that are no less sharp, words that hurt you, a message that makes you anxious, negative thoughts that suddenly rise up, worries about finances or a situation you do not yet know how to solve. These things can pierce your mind like weapons, but when you pray first, you are stepping into that same promise Isaiah wrote about. You can face the truth that your weakness is not the end point, because you begin this day with the one who is stronger than anything that stands against you. And then there is another promise, God's promise to heal. Jeremiah says that God will restore health and heal wounds. What is striking here is the word wounds. Being an adult does not mean you stop being wounded. There are wounds no one sees. There are thoughts that exhaust your mind, memories that tighten your chest, worries that stretch your body like a taut string. You may not be able to name them, but they are still there. Jeremiah does not say those things are not real. He only says that God can touch them in a way that humans cannot. When you pray at the start of the day, when you breathe out the heaviness and open your heart for God to come in, you are giving yourself the chance to be healed from within, even before you step into the outside world. Another promise that many people love is found in Deuteronomy, where God says that you will be blessed when you come in and blessed when you go out. This has never been a promise of blind luck. It is a promise of companionship. Blessing here does not mean you will always avoid every difficulty. Blessing means you never have to enter anything alone. Think about that. If you begin the day with work pressure, blessing does not necessarily turn everything perfect immediately, but it gives you clarity to go in the right direction, patience so you do not collapse, and wisdom to know what must be prioritized. When you step out of your home, blessing does not guarantee that you avoid every difficult crossroads, but it guarantees you are protected at every step and that good things can still find you in ways you do not expect. And then there is the sentence many people know by heart. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. These three are not just three emotions. They are three pillars on which you stand in weary days. Power to remind you that you are not as weak as you think. Love to remind you that you are not alone. Peace of mind to remind you that you do not need to hurry or be afraid. There is something interesting. These promises are not always explained through complex theology. They are often seen most clearly in everyday life. You may be worried about money. You may be trying to balance work and relationships. You may be carrying a private sadness no one knows about. These things are not sins, they are part of life. But when they climb to the top of the list, they easily exhaust you. Morning prayer does not make those responsibilities disappear. It simply returns them to their proper place. And when they return there, they no longer look so big that they overshadow your inner life. You see them with more calm, with some distance to think, and with guidance to act. You are doing something very similar to those who have gone before you in faith, standing before a new day with humility, but also with trust. You are not promising yourself that everything will be easy. You are simply affirming that you want to step into this day not with fear, but with faith, not with panic, but with wisdom from above, not with heaviness, but with deep peace inside. And that is what opens the door for everyday miracles. Not miracles that break the laws of nature, but miracles that make your heart lighter, your thoughts clearer, and your footing steadier in situations you once thought you could never bear. There is a truth that anyone who has lived through many seasons of life eventually realizes. What decides the quality of a day is not what happens outside, but what has already happened inside us first. Some people start their morning in a rush and carry that rush all day. Some open their eyes, already anxious, and that anxiety becomes a long shadow over every step. Others begin with peace, and they discover that this peace can carry them through even the hardest tasks. When you put God first, when you pray first, you are choosing to let your soul enter the new day from that third point, the point of peace. Not because you have solved everything, but because you know you do not have to face it all alone. Not because your circumstances have changed, but because you have changed first. That is the deepest truth hidden beneath all the stories we have walked through together. When Israel stood before the sea, it was not their perfection that opened the waters. When the walls of Jericho fell, it was not their strength that brought them down. When Daniel survived the lion's den, it was not his intelligence that saved him. All of it began with a trust placed in the right place. Morning prayer is the same. It does not make you a stronger person in the usual sense. It makes you a person with a foundation. That foundation is not a passing feeling. It comes from the fact that the God you are turning to is the same God who acted in those stories. He has not grown weaker with time and is not withdrawn from people just because modern life has become more complicated. He is still strong, still near, still listening, still acting. And when you begin the day by putting him first, you are stepping into that very same stream. Another important thing, morning prayer does not just change how you see God, it changes how you see yourself. Perhaps you step into the morning feeling tired or afraid that you are not good enough, not strong enough, not wise enough. But when you put God first, you are telling yourself that you do not have to live out of your own sufficiency, but out of his sufficiency. That is why the original video emphasized many times that when you pray through the entire prayer, you do not just feel different, you truly become different. That is not an exaggeration. That is a spiritual reality. You step into the new day no longer driven by fear, but led by faith. No longer weighed down by yesterday's memories, but lifted by the truth that today is a new opportunity. No longer struggling alone with your worries, but accompanied by the Almighty. Everything you have heard in this journey leads to a very simple but incredibly powerful truth. When the root is right, the tree stands firm. When what comes first is right, everything else finds its place. When you put God first, the rest of the day has something to hold on to. You can look back at the earlier examples and see an interesting consistency. Isaiah speaks of protection, Jeremiah speaks of healing, Deuteronomy speaks of blessing in every step, and Paul reminds us that God has not given us a spirit of fear. When these words are placed together, they form a very clear picture of what happens when a person puts God first. They are protected, healed, guided, given peace, upheld, and directed. Not because they do not face hardship, but because they do not step into hardship empty-handed. This is why morning prayer is so powerful. It is like looking at your soul in a mirror before stepping into a long day. It is like recalibrating your compass so that you are not lost amid demands and noise. It is like letting the light pass through the darkness in your heart before the darkness of circumstances finds its way in. The longer you live, the more you will realize that real strength does not lie in how many things you can control, but in whom you rely on when things you cannot control happen. This morning, you choose to rely on the one who made heaven and earth. That choice is humble, courageous, and deep. And that is why it changes everything. The central truth of this section can be put into one simple sentence. The morning is not just the time to start a day. It is the time to shape the soul. And when the soul is shaped rightly, the whole day is directed rightly. There is something very important about morning faith. If truth does not touch real life, it remains on the page. But when truth steps into the ordinary matters of human life, it truly becomes power. That is the spirit of this part. Not for you to collect more knowledge, but for you to recognize that everything you have heard from the beginning until now has a place in your real life. Not theoretical, not symbolic, but concrete, simple, and deep applications flowing directly from the content of the original video. Think about your own mornings. Perhaps you wake up with a reel of unfinished thoughts from yesterday, plans that strain you, an email you have not dared to open, a conversation that left your heart heavy. Sometimes that single moment is enough to color the whole day with anxiety. This is not imagination. This is a reality everyone goes through. And it is exactly at that point that the invitation to pray first becomes most practical. Praying first is not for you to escape reality, but to step into reality with a heart that has already been shaped. When you begin the day with surrender, you are putting your worries in their proper place. The worries do not disappear immediately, but they are no longer leading you. The presence of God is what leads you. You enter your work not as someone internally torn apart, but with the mindset of one who knows they are not walking alone. Then there is your work, your business, and the things you are trying to build. The original video prayed very clearly for these things: wisdom, creativity, advancement, being seen, and protection from evil. These are not empty motivational words. They are very practical prayers. Because in the end, we all live in a world where work can drain people completely. But when you pray first, you do not enter work in a spirit of mere survival, but with a new alertness. You know what matters. You know what to let go. You know what to keep. You know what is your responsibility and what you must hand back to God. And then there is family. The video spent much time praying for family, for children, for safety, for peace in the home. That is not accidental. Family is where people are most vulnerable and where they long most for support. Therefore, morning prayer is like placing an invisible arm around those you love. No one can control everything that happens to their loved ones, but giving them to God before the day begins is how you place them in the only hands that can truly protect. And then there are the hidden battles, the things you never tell anyone, the exhaustion you cannot put into words, the thoughts you do not want to repeat. The video named them very clearly: the weakest places, the deepest wounds, the parts of your heart you think no one understands. Morning prayer does not perform miracles by making all pain disappear. It does something deeper. It brings those things into the light, places them in God's presence, where they can no longer suffocate you. Finally, the greatest application is this: you begin the day with spiritual intentionality. You do not let circumstances shape you first. You shape yourself first in order to step into circumstances. That is what makes the difference between a day full of pressure and a day full of direction. Everything in this section starts from the same point. When you put God first, you put yourself in the right place. And from that right place, you can handle everything else with clarity, peace, and strength you cannot produce on your own. When a journey reaches its end, what remains is not the number of words spoken, but the quiet movement within the heart of the listener. You have gone through this morning not only with your ears, but with your mind and soul. And that matters, because only what touches the soul can stay with you for the whole day, even for a lifetime. This final part is not to add more knowledge or analysis. It simply invites you to pause, look deeply within, and recognize what is happening inside you after everything you have just heard. Try to sense it a little. A new day lies before you. Many things may not have changed. Responsibilities are still there. Questions without answers are still there. The things you are asking God to do may not have appeared yet. But what has changed is you. From the beginning until now, you have heard about putting God first. You have walked through images in the Bible, promises, examples, and practical applications. And now you are standing at the peak of this journey, asking yourself, what does this mean for my own today? It means you no longer begin the day in heaviness, but in gratitude. Not because everything is perfect, but because you know you are not going through this day alone. God is not standing far away, observing. He walks beside you. He steps with you through every small thing. He shelters you in moments you do not see. He lifts you when you are weak and holds your heart when your feet no longer feel steady. You may still not see the answer, but you are invited to believe that what you prayed for this morning does not vanish into thin air. It is being fulfilled in ways you cannot yet see. God never abandons the prayers of His children. When you speak, He hears. When you surrender, He acts. When you trust, He makes a way. That is why the original video emphasized that when you go through the full prayer, you do not just feel different, you become different. Because you step out of this morning with the awareness that you are covered, guided, loved, and kept. The beautiful thing is that this transformation is not noisy. It does not come like a flash of lightning. It comes like a gentle light over a lake, like a soft breeze through the trees. But that gentleness goes very deep. It quiets your heart. It reminds you that strength is not always found in loud noise, but often in the softness that God places inside you. When you step out the door this morning, perhaps no one will know that you spent time in prayer. No one will know that your heart has been reordered. No one will know that you placed the day into God's hands. But it does not need to be known by people. What matters is that God knows. And that is the firmest foundation for your steps. The invitation at the end is very simple. Do not leave this morning without carrying with you what you have just received. Let this peace go with you. Let this wakefulness remind you who is walking beside you. Let the words that touched you this morning become a way of living, not just a moment. And if this morning has truly made you stronger, more peaceful, more steady, that is the sign you are walking in the right direction. There is no need to look for a great miracle immediately. Sometimes the miracle is simply that you open your eyes and know that God is still working in places you cannot see. Before we end, I want to say this to you. You are not stepping into an ordinary day. You are stepping into a consecrated day. A day covered by God's presence. A day in which angels guard every step. A day in which the words you prayed this morning are beginning to work quietly but surely. What you have just done is not a ritual. It is an act of faith, and every act of faith carries within it the seed of a miracle. Do not keep this for yourself. If what you heard this morning has lightened your soul, if it has drawn you closer to God, share it with someone in need. You do not know what they will face today, but it might be that the word you send is exactly what lifts them up. And if you want to continue this journey every day, stay with content like this, so that every morning will not just be the start of a day, but the start of new peace, new direction, and new strength. Lord, in this quiet moment, we pause to lay everything before you. Not in haste, not hiding anything, not trying to be strong in our own power. We simply come as we are, with our small joys, our unfinished concerns, and the things in our hearts no one sees but you. We thank you for this morning, not only for a new day, but because you give us the chance to begin it in your presence. Let our hearts recognize that every good thing begins here, in this moment when we put you first. Lord, please protect us today. Whether we step into work, family time, or unexpected encounters, let your peace go before every step. Hold back anything that could harm us. Calm the storms within before they become storms outside. Please heal the places in our hearts that are still weary. Touch the deepest wounds, the most hidden worries, the hopes that have been delayed for too long. You know every part of us better than we know ourselves, and you know how to mend everything gently and completely. Grant us clarity to do our work today, wisdom to choose what is right, courage to move when you open the way, and patience to wait for you in what you have not yet answered. Cover our families, those we love. Keep them safe, guard their minds with peace, and let our homes become shelters of quiet and grace. Lord, we place this day in your hands, not because we are weak, but because we know that true strength comes only when our souls lean on you. Let everything we do and everywhere we go be guided by your light. We step into this new day with gratitude, with peace, and with the faith that you are at work in the smallest details. Amen. If the words you have just heard have made your morning lighter, if they have helped your mind to rest and reminded you that you are not going through this day alone, I want to invite you to remain in this space a little longer. Subscribe to the channel so that every morning we can continue to begin the day in wakefulness, in God's presence, and in a strengthened spirit. Click subscribe and let me walk with you on this spiritual journey, day by day, step by step, prayer by prayer.